performing housing stock is actually in some of our poorer places. So places like Burnley and Stoke, about 70% of their housing stock has an EPC rating of C or below. And I think that raises a bunch of questions that we should grapple with today around who should be involved in the decarbonisation process, who should lead, what the relevant roles are for different actors. And I think when we think about what's to be done, the role and contribution of geography in helping us think about not only the problem, but also the solution and the programme development. So lots to discuss today, big subject. And we've got a great panel to discuss them. So let me introduce our panel and then we'll get into a bit of a conversation with them. So our panelists are Dr. Alan Whitehead, who's an MP for Southampton Test and Shadow Minister for Energy Security. Emma Fletcher, Low Carbon Housing Director for Octopus Energy. And Professor Nick Robbins, Professor in Practice for Sustainable Finance at the LSE Grantham Research Institute and co-founder of the Financing the Just Transition Alliance. So they are our panelists. Each of them will set out their stall in the first regard, some opening remarks from each of them with Nick kicking us off. And then we'll try to organise to the best we can our discussion into two parts. So one, I think, discussing the nature of the challenge, what's the issue, but also then part two is what might we do about that issue or the issues, and who's best placed to lead and who's best placed to participate. So that's where we'll do it. Throughout, you can put your questions or your comments where you agree or where you disagree with our panelists, and you use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to do that. I'll keep an eye on that throughout, and then I'll be pitching those into the conversation in due course. So that's how we'll do it, and we'll be finished by 1 o'clock. So without further ado, Nick, give us your opening remarks on the big issue around decarbonising the UK's housing stock.
Well, thanks, Andrew. It's great to be on this panel, this noontime. So just to kick us off, I suppose, so three themes to sort of set the scene, I think. Firstly, we're going to need a sort of system solution for this. We are significantly off track in terms of decarbonising the housing stock, according to the Committee on Climate Change. We also have severe issues on affordability. 3.5 million of our citizens are in fuel poverty, and we know this is fundamentally unstable because of the reliance on fossil fuels, as we've seen through the cost of living crisis, which still endures because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that's the situation, and housing is about a fifth of the nation's emissions, rising to about a third in big cities. But we know what we need to do, and I think we'll discuss that. So that's the first thing. We need a sort of system solution. The second is that because this is housing, this is people's homes, we need to put people and fairness at the heart. And if I can just quote something which came out this week from the really good initiative called Britain Talks Climate, and their key recommendation was governments must make the transition fair, taking responsibility for investment and funding, and it's non-negotiable that the transition is fair and feels fair. People are worried that the transition will cost them money they don't have, and leaders must design policies that provide decent climate-friendly options to everyone, managing the costs for society and individuals, which I think sort of captured that very well. And the third, which is what we focus on at the LSE, we just set up a Just Transition Finance Lab, is we need a new generation of financing mechanisms. There's finance available in the private sector, but we're going to need government funding, we need financial institutions to step up, and also think about how citizens can be engaged. So system solutions, it needs to be fair, and we need some sort of new generation of financial solutions.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you very much for that, Nick. We'll come back to all of those issues undoubtedly when we get to the discussion. So Emma, over to you. Give us your sort of opening salvo on the nature of the issue and where do you think we are?
So for Octopus, it's always about our customers and ensuring that they have a fair, green and a just transition into a greener world, a more sustainable world. And to that end, we need to actually look at the household level data. As mentioned previously, we've got actually a huge amount of carbon being released by our households and the residential sector. And actually, a lot of the homes that we're occupying now are still going to be around in 2050, which is the key date that's banded around a lot. So we think we have a huge role to play in encouraging our customers. And we also believe that the only way to decarbonise the biggest issues that we've got, which is mainly the heating of our leaky homes, is by decarbonising and moving away from burning gas in our homes, in boilers, and looking at a much fairer, greener transition into air source heat pumps, which are arguably 3 to 4 times more efficient than gas boilers. So together with insulation and actually improving our housing stock, we see that we play a huge role in encouraging our customers to move away from gas to a more electrified world. To that end, Octopus is as a supplier of electricity, has to provide funding into the Eco4 programme. So we're doing an awful lot in the retrofit space, assisting those on the lowest incomes in order to decarbonise their homes. We also, at the end of last year, were one of the largest installers of green technology with us to our customers, utilising the £7,500 grant to swap out gas boilers to air source heat pumps. And we spend a lot of time educating our customers, who on the whole love engaging with us, into changing their behaviours to turn off power when it's expensive, for example, between 5 and 7 o'clock at night, when it's a very cold evening and not very windy. So actually showing our customers they can actually empower themselves to reduce their bills, but also ensure that the grid does not hit capacity. So we have a number of different things we're doing. We have an innovation centre in Slough. We aim to train over 1,000 people a year through there on air source heat pump installations and solar panels. But very much we see this as a system approach, and everybody has to play their part. And there's many things we can get involved in, but similarly many players that have to work together to ensure that we actually achieve the targets we want to hit.
Brilliant, excellent, very good. And definitely I'll come back to you. It'd be interesting to get some thoughts from you as to, when you're trying to encourage customers to change behaviours, what do you find works well, and what doesn't? What are the things that you find actually bring about some of the change behaviours? So it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that when we open up into conversation. Alan, Shadow Minister for Energy Security. Good to see you. Let's have some opening comments from you. You're on mute at the moment.
So, well, good morning. You might say it's fairly simple in one sense, that we have, as Emma has said, a huge standing stock of housing, which is, generally speaking, certainly by European standards, very energy inefficient, very leaky, and what we have to do with that existing housing stock is proof it from an energy efficiency point of view against 2050 standards. That is, we need to make sure that with our existing housing stock, it is retrofitted, made energy efficient in such a way that you won't have to come back and do it again in 15 years' time because the standards have changed further. So basically, it's the period now where we've just got to get our housing up to scratch as far as energy efficiency is concerned, proof against the future. And the second issue then is in terms of new build, what we are going to have to require within that new build. And we've got the Future Home Standard coming in 2026, I think. But what we are going to have to do as far as the energy efficiency of new build, which are, as it were, will become that standing housing stock by 2050, what we're going to have to do in terms of making sure that we are using all the newer technologies that we have in place to make those homes, again, not in a position where anyone has to come around and retrofit them in 15 years' time, because we've already got that in those houses in the first place. And that brings us to all sorts of debates about how well we can get, for example, heat pumps generally, not just around new homes, but also into retrofitted effectively into existing homes. How we've got to go much further than the sort of fabric arrangements that we've had into retrofit programs in the past, whereby, such as it is, the programs have been largely about loft insulation, wall insulation, one or two other things. That's it. It's got to be all about getting new energy systems into place to manage our homes in a much more effective way, and also contemplating the idea that homes themselves may be energy generators for the future, and how that can be arranged so that, as it were, your net contribution of your home with fabric fit, new systems fit, and energy generation is effectively net zero for the future. So that's the agenda in front of us. Now, we've on the opposition side, we've got a number of what we think are good ideas for moving that agenda forward, which I hope we'll maybe discuss later on. But I just point out the main ones, and that is the Warm Homes Plan, which is about taking that retrofit into a different level and doing that area by area, home by home across the country over the next period, rather than the dab at it approach that we've had at the moment, of finding a home that needs retrofitting and then finding another one and then obliging energy companies to do bits about that in the meantime. We've got to move beyond that into a serious national program of energy retrofit, which is indeed going to be fit for the 2050s.
Great, excellent. Okay, well, we'll come back to your some of your good ideas. Nick and Emma, you both mentioned the importance and significance of a systems approach to the way that we think about this. Nick, you just expand that a little bit and say, what value do we get from that type of approach? How does it make us think differently about the nature of the issue? How does it bring in maybe a different set of, or broader set of actors than we might typically consider? What's the real value? And I get Emma to say something on that as well, because she mentioned it towards the end of her opening comments. Nick.
Well, clearly we're dealing with climate change with many different systems, but the energy system has largely been around incentives, carbon pricing, incentives for deployment of renewables. We've been doing pretty well on that, and particularly on the technology, and really gaining from the rapid reduction of the costs there. So we need to take systems approach there, but particularly with housing, I think the other dimension that's really striking is, obviously this is people's homes. So the system dimension there is the behavioral aspects of people in different types of homes, whether that's owner occupied or mortgage or social housing or private rentals, really understanding the human dimension, and in particular the sort of the place-based dimension of this, that the housing is in particular places, and that has benefits in terms of thinking about the efficiency in terms of rollout of technology and retrofit options. And then maybe just the other system we need to connect to this is the financial system, and thinking about actually how we get finance. Most of the UK's biggest banks, the investors, are now all signed up to net zero, and we've been discussing with them about the question of buildings and housing. But it's an area which at the moment I think was described by one banker as sticky as mud, that actually getting from that high level commitment through their housing mortgage portfolios to enable people to live in sort of warm and decarbonised and affordable homes is still tricky. So we've got to put all these pieces together. And the good thing is I think there's an appetite for it. So technology systems, sort of human behavioural aspects, and then the finance piece as well.
Brilliant, excellent. Emma, you mentioned sort of a systems perspective as well. But what do you mean? What does Octopus mean when it says that, and how does that give you a a slightly different view or a way of looking at the nature of the issue and then what to do about it?
I mean, everything Nick said, we're actively working with the Green Finance Institute members, looking at how we can finance some of these projects, both at the individual scale, community scale, and actually town and city scale. But, you know, we've got a fundamental problem with the grid. So we need to be working with the large grid, then with the suppliers, for example, UK Power Networks and others, in terms of actually how do we move the electrons, the green electrons, literally to the householder. And grid supply and blockages is a real issue if we're going to electrify the country. But then there's other issues. So I was talking with the community groups in Scotland this morning. They cannot install smart meters in certain areas because they don't have mobile connectivity. Well, you know, that's a problem for us as an electricity provider, but we're not a mobile supplier. So, you know, it's all these little hurdles that come together, and then literally down to the man and the woman on the street. We've got to find people who are going to supply this equipment, but also people who are trusted to give advice to householders. We do not want a spray foam sort of insulation problem of the past. Different homes require different types of technologies, different solutions, and therefore we need to be working closely with the sort of retrofit community that is growing out there in terms of sound advice. And wearing my RICS residential chair hat, you know, we really need to make sure surveyors are involved in this to make sure, you know, we are doing the right thing by householders so we don't go and have to retrofit later on or rip anything out. So for us, there's not one size fits all solution to any home. There's not one size fits all solution to any village, town or city. So there are many players that have to come into it. And at the end of the day, this does need to be financed to ensure that people can afford to do this to their homes and to their communities.
I'll bring Alan in a second, but just to stay with you for a second and maybe Nick come in and does the interrelated nature, the complex nature of the issue, you know, in a sense that does that help or hinder when we then think about how to move forward on, you know, on certain aspects or on the program more generally? How do we go from, you know, it involves a lot of things and it's all very complicated and integrated to, but we need to make action and we need to think about certain things that we can really push on. How do we manage that from complexity to action?
I would say we need brave players in this space. You're going to have to be brave, be bold, stick to your guns, put your head up above the parapet and say, this is the way we're going and this is what we're doing. And we need policies in place that ensure that we have certainty. I mean, for us as a perceived to be a very innovative company, you know, we think a lot about what our customers needs and wants, and we try and anticipate that, and we innovate, and we use a lot of brain power trying to think, well, actually, what could we be doing better? You know, we're often put on a pedestal as being an excellent example, but we need more people to be joining us, to be bold, to really drive this industry forward, because, you know, it's going to take a lot of different ideas, creativity, new businesses, enthusiasm, young people coming into the industry to help drive this change.
Brilliant. Nick, come in on this. I mean, you know, how do we manage it's all very interrelated and complicated and complex. We all, you know, we recognize that to varying degrees, but then we have to try and do something about it, right? And yes, we would ideally move at, you know, at pace across a whole range of different things, but just how do we manage that? What's your thought on that?
I mean, clearly there's a problem if you think about these complex systems and add another layer and another layer, you can have sort of paralysis from analysis. But I think in a sense, we know what doesn't work. And I think the clear is we need a very clear signal from government about where we need to end up, and also put the decarbonisation story and the net zero story very much in terms of human benefit, in terms of people's homes and so on. And I think particularly with the cost of living crisis, we do have an opportunity, which I think sadly we haven't really taken up over the last few years, to really bring the affordability issue, benefits for people there, the sort of security issue, and also the decarbonisation. So I think it does start with a sense of mission, boldness. I think sort of as Emma was saying, but then very clearly, I don't think there's not huge major players who are opposing this at the moment. Is really bringing people together to give them clear roles in this system change. So I think that's the way forward.
Brilliant. Alan, just come in on this sort of question. You're trying to both understand the nature, but also then ultimately be thinking about what to do about it. Just reflections of what Emma and Nick have said around the way that we think about the issue and how we deal with some of those complicated issues. How do you move beyond that then? You're on mute, Alan.
Number one, we don't do things in the same way as we've done them in the past, as far as energy retrofit is concerned, and that's for a number of reasons.
What's the big mistake that we got wrong before? I'm sure there'll be lots of mistakes, but what's the big one that we don't?
The big mistake before is we ran a series of discrete programs, which mainly consisted of marching all sorts of people up to the top of the hill with a promise of what was going to be in front of them, and then marching them smartly down the hill again when the scheme didn't work, or the funding pot was gone, or that the criteria changed. So absolutely, number one, you need to have a clear plan over a considerable period of time and carry that plan out overall. It may not be the best plan, but it is a plan that actually will stick for the future. And that's very important, because housing retrofit has to involve a lot more than just finding a few houses here and there to do some work on, which is, although it's had its very good elements, the eco program, for example, is fundamentally based on that idea. And that's actually quite resource wasteful in terms of trying to find people who qualify for particular schemes and then trying to get the work done. If you have planned schemes which actually envelop whole areas, for example, and you do that over considerable time, everybody knows where they are, what they're doing, what skills are needed, how you're going to actually carry those things out, and to what level you're going to try and get those homes at the end. So that's, I think, number one key point. The other key point is, of course, yes, this is very complicated. There's a whole question in retrofit of who's in what type of tenure, who's in what kind of house. Is it a cavity wall home or a solid wall home? Different treatments are going to be needed for different kinds of homes, and indeed for financing. They're going to be very different financial arrangements between, say, owner-occupiers, private sector landlord homes, social housing, council housing, etc. So to get that balance right in terms of where you put your resources and where you're not putting your resources directly, how you can lever in other resources through things such as zero interest loans, encouragement of landlords to uprate their properties, various things such as that, which have to be part of an overall package. And I think the final thing is this all has to take place within an understanding of the new energy environment that we're in, so that for example, Emma has already made mention of this, a lot of these things are not going to work in the long term unless we've actually got the infrastructure, both in new housing and in existing housing, for those homes to be energy smart. And among other things, the fact that all homes need smart meters is a really important element, both of the individual home's ability to react back again to what is being done to the home, as it were, in a new intelligent energy environment, but also how overall homes can participate in being intelligent and getting the collective benefit of that energy intelligence in homes generally coming to them. And indeed, that's, I think, going to be a really big problem over the next period of getting that energy environment up to date with our ambitions for housing for the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I will definitely come on to very shortly. I get to say a little bit about, her customers and, what patterns you see about take up interest and what sort of things that they do and what motivates them. I'll definitely come on to that in a second. But before I do that, Nick, just so we talked about the housing stock, and obviously, simplistically, we've got a retrofit challenge, i.e., existing stock, and what to do about that. And then there's a question about new build and new stock and what we do about that. And obviously, part of the answer to retrofit is more new build and all of that. But just give us a big picture about how do we think about these sorts of challenges? Where do we think that we ought to be spending some time, thinking about and focusing on? Obviously, the existing stock is huge relative to the flow of new build at any one moment. But when we just think about what the nature of the challenge is, do you see that as quite a different sort of two different buckets to really think about, Nick?
I mean, the big problem, as we've discussed already, is the existing stock, which is going to be around for many decades. And I think there we need to get, again, very granular about the different types of people, households who live in that. So from the social housing through the private rental, through the mortgage to the owner-occupied, and different ways in which the technology we talked about, the technology packages, the retrofit packages, can be taken up by people at scale. So this is not the sort of individual house by house model, or sort of scattered gun model, which I think Alan was talking about, but very sustained through a place-based approach. And then clearly on the new housing, we need to get that so that all new housing is fossil free. I think, again, we've had major setbacks where we haven't made that. That needs to be a standard. Again, we see what's happened in terms of the vulnerability of housings that are reliant on fossil fuels such as gas. So I think that needs to be as standard. But the main thing now is particularly the scale, is to think about those different housing types. And we've touched on it a bit, but I mean, one of the things which was striking from the Climate Change Committee's net zero workforce report is this is the biggest area. If we're thinking about a green economy, it's this area, the construction sector, in terms of retrofit and upgrading technology. It's essentially a sort of 250,000 people that's going to be needed. So those jobs need to be skilled, they need to be attractive, need to have good and decent working conditions. So as well as the sort of old and new, I think we need to think about that sort of workforce dimension, so that, and particularly people feel they can build sort of solid careers on this, and not in sectors which maybe are going to have the sort of incentive rug pulled from them, as we've heard from Alan. Yeah,
Alan, just say a little bit around that. I mean, you talked about, well, all three of you talked about, the need for clear government signals that are, government signals that are both clear but also consistent and are not liable to change. I'd be interested in, Emma's thought on that, how that affects businesses, particularly on the investment side, never mind on other side. But Alan, just say a little bit more around that, and actually creating the market, creating the opportunity, and what you might do. And you're on mute.
Well, I mean, we can see from experience just what the marching people up to the top of the hill and down again mode of working on retrofit has done for the industry. So, with the Green Deal, a whole lot of people were trained up as energy assessors, and then when it all fell flat, off they went somewhere else. With the Green Homes grant just recently, lots of firms took on a number of new skilled and semi-skilled people to undertake the work. Then that collapsed in a heap. All those people laid off again. So one of the absolutely essential points, for two reasons, of making sure you've got, say, a 10-year program ahead of you with the same criteria applied at all stages during that 10-year period, is that the people who are actually going to be doing the work are confident that that work will be there. It's not going to be feast and famine. And they are confident that if they actually sort their workforces up to address those particular issues, then those people will be in that workforce for a considerable period of time. And indeed, as Nick says, can start considering this as a career rather than an occasional joust with a bit of retrofitting. and that then means that you're much more able to bring the skills that are needed for the industry into being, because people will start coming into technical level training and education, knowing that actually there is a career and a job for them after that, and will want to come in and train and take part in that process because they see a future ahead. So it's all about actually getting those clear signals at the start of the process, which then percolates through on a virtuous circle to ensuring that actually the progress that you started off by your clear decision continues of its own accord, as it were.
Yeah.
And in so doing, physically raises the EPC levels to the targets that we want them to get to. So it's a completely joined up process.
Yeah.
Of getting the whole thing working properly.
Yeah.
So that you've got a number of assumptions about future housing management and retrofit, which actually just are light years away from the assumptions we've had really for so many years in the past.
Yeah, no, very good. Emma, it's a tough question, but I mean, just picking up on what Alan and Nick have said, for a business like Octopus, what sort of dividend or what sort of effect would a 10-year sort of commitment to this is what we're proposing to do? This is, all things being equal, we're going to do this for 10 years and, we're going to try and do our damnedest not to change tack in any serious ways. I mean, what does that do for a business like for Octopus in terms of future investment, future prioritization, the decisions you make as a business in this kind of space? How big a dividend can we get from just providing you with consistency and certainty?
Oh, it means everything. It means everything to us. It means everything to our supply chain. It means everything to the people we're training up and giving jobs to. And I totally agree with what Alan says. We cannot go to start changing some of the grants that have finally got out there and are working straight away. It needs a smooth transition into any future thoughts, because we've seen a huge take up, for example, in the air source heat park grant. It does take the general public a little while to get behind some of these ideas. So yes, maybe it was a steady start, but we're now seeing huge numbers of people come forward from our customer base, of which we've now got 6.5 million customers. It does take time. You need to factor time into people taking these up, seeing their neighbour get an air source heat pump, seeing the fact that their house is still warm and cosy. There's trust that has to be built up with the general public, and that's what we spend a lot of time with our customer base doing, is saying, look, trust us, we're doing the right thing. And yes, a 10-year horizon would be great, but actually we take a far longer horizon. Our customers are investing in their homes for the rest of their lives potentially. And therefore, we need to look at 2050 and come back. So this is making the right decisions for the long term, not just a short-term cycle. Yeah. In terms of engaging with our customers, I mean, as you'll see from the background and fluffy octopuses, we want to make this fun, right? So for our customers, this is about do the right thing, reduce your bills, have a happier, healthier lifestyle, but let's have a bit of fun as well. And to encourage people to take up smart meters, we reward you. We have points, Octo points you can gain. But similarly, if you have a smart meter, currently you can get a free warm drink at either Cafe Nero or Greg's every week. If you join our saver sessions, we will engage with you on social media. We'll run a virtual pub quiz. People want to talk and engage with this, and not everybody knows how to. Not everybody's going to understand the technicalities of batteries and solar to the 8th degree. But actually, if you can make this transition fun and people see the benefits, you're going to see huge rewards. And for us investing in our workforce, we had 2,000 jobs last year. Over 250,000 people applied for them. Yet we hardly have any policies or any procedures. We are totally driven by our purpose, our focus, and our ethos about doing the right thing by our customers and a green transition. And if you're strong enough in your vision and your view, people will come with you. And we think it's worth that investment. It's worth doing the right thing and showing how we leading the way and showing our customers how we can make it easy for them, and and fun and affordable, and their lives will be fundamentally better for it, be it in lower bills, warmer homes, and potentially, see them, as Alan has said, generating some power as well at the same time from those investments. So there's lots of things to be done. But I think, this transition does not have to be pale, and boring. This can be fun, exciting, pink and vibrant. And I think people need to be brought on that journey.
And just to stay in that sort of theme, Emma, I mean, you said, what, 6.5 million customers? Is that right?
In the UK.
Across the UK. Yeah. What sort of, in terms of take-up interest, not just interest, but actually translating that into doing something in this sort of space, are there patterns and trends, in terms of households that look like this are more likely to do that? I mean, do you have sort of macro sort of ideas about, when you look to get into, to affecting behavior change, where are you getting most return or where are you getting least return? I mean, because in part, it's what you're doing, but it's also then what the government might be doing and all the rest of it. Is it kind of mixing these things together? I'd be interested in, where you're seeing the appetite being the greatest and why that might be, do you think? And get Nick to come on this as well, I think.
I mean, our customers are fantastic. As soon as the grant level changed, the emails started flying in on the request for the air source heat pumps. People could see the benefit of this grant coming in. On the solar and the battery, we're definitely seeing a lot more people applying for the solar and battery through our website. Last week, I was hosting a podcast with the head of data at Rightmove, and what they're seeing is huge trends. For example, in the Southwest, when people are looking for homes, they're Googling for the first time, ever. They're looking for things like solar panels, batteries. So it's working with other partners to look at their trends in order that we match it with our trends as well. So I think, the consumer base is certainly far more engaged than ever before, and I think we can build on that momentum, and I think the messaging just has to be clear, concise and similar from all the people you interact with. Our customers are other people's customers. If they've become a B Corp corporation, their customer base is going to be engaged in the sustainability space. So customers and individuals need to hear this messaging from different angles in their life, to just make them sure that they're doing the right thing, and they feel that they understand, the options they have available to them. Yeah.
And Emma, this is a genuine question. And, are typically your customers from what I would sort of say, the way I think about the world is, are they from the upper half of the income distribution? Do they tend to be more stable, more prosperous households? I mean, is that an unfair characteristic of your customers? Because the only reason I'm asking is we can understand the bits where, we need to make interventions of different nature beyond customers themselves seeing the value because of where they are in their sort of current situation.
I would say probably in the start, maybe. When we first launched and we were seen to be providing green electricity, maybe it attracted that type of person. But certainly across the board, we have a really broad mix of people. We've got 6.5 million customers, right? So we've got a fairly broad mix. We even have a team of social workers who work on our customer lines to engage. So if you email us, you get a person. If you call us, you get a person. So we invest heavily in making sure that when you make contact with us, our people really understand you. We sent out over 40,000 electric blankets during the coldest months to customers to help them, actually keep warm. So we care very much so. So I would say there's no one reflective group anymore. We are here for everyone. And as more and more sort of green technology is installed, especially in the social housing sector, more people are looking to our tariffs to really optimize the technology on their home. Yeah. So I would say we are here for everybody, and we will do our best by our customer as best we can, for the utmost time we can. And we know we can always get better.
Excellent. Very good. Nick, come in on this. I mean, Emma's given a great response, and it's a broad and varied sort of customer base, Nick. But it'd be interesting in because you talked right at the beginning around fairness, and particularly, there is a cohort that are in, they're struggling on a day-to-day basis, and some of these sorts of question issues feel like, they're big, they're costly, and they're, for some time in the future. It's more around how do we reflect on that, but how do we make progress in some of those areas with some of those households as well.
Oh, exactly. I can see in the chat as well. We had a question from Connell on that as well.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I think the current government has used the issue of fairness to actually delay climate action rather than sort of looking at the issue of fairness as an accelerant, because by doing things in a way which is fair, you actually build trust with the different households we've talked about. One of the things we've been looking at is actually looking at the mortgage market, so one slice of this. But even in that, there are issues of fairness, and one of the things that has come through is the risk of so-called property prisoners, that people who might be in houses which are very low in energy efficiency but are unable to get the financing to upgrade those. And I think particularly because this is a sort of investment intensive process, access to that investment is the big issue of fairness, and there could be some unintended consequences. So as banks, for example, are trying to hit their net zero targets, there could be issues whereby actually they're not going to be actually providing the loans to help upgrade to customer base. So we could be in a sort of we could have unintended consequences. Being very aware of that at the beginning is really important. So in each of those, and I think probably that would be what a new administration would be bringing, so that the decarbonisation agenda, which we're talking about today, is very, very clearly linked to very segmented issues around fairness. How do people, if they are owner-occupied or if they're in the mortgage market, how do they get access to finance, so maybe supported by governments and government schemes? On the social housing scheme, what can be done more there? Government money. There's also interest, I think, from investors into money, providing money through bonds, and then obviously the private rental in terms of strengthening the regulations there as well, because that's where there's a lot of vulnerability in particular. So I think it's been very, very sort of evidence-based on all those different types of people, and ensuring that this is going to be something that in a sense that people are going to be working with households in this. One of the things, again, just talking to some of the banks, is that it's about the people you bring to the table, and I think there is going to be a role for banks, for companies, and so on, but also social enterprises who are quite rooted in communities. And I think this maybe is a theme we're going to come to, but actually the role of thinking about this in a community sense, yes, in particular places, notably cities, but therefore what can local authorities, social enterprises working there, SMEs who are going to be providing them bulk of this, how can they be brought into this as well?
Yeah, well, we'll definitely come on to in a second around what we think that the relevant roles and contributions that different sorts of actors can play, particularly at the below the national level, because we've talked a little bit about government. We'll come to that in a second. But before we do, Alan, just say a little bit about Labour's thinking in relation to the things that sort of Emma was talking about in terms of what's going on, and she could see that in her customer base. And then a little bit about what Nick was saying, we need to think about segmenting the market, which then allows us to think more carefully about where government intervention can be best used to support and encourage and amplify what's going on with customers, or with through market mechanisms, I suppose. Where's Labour's thinking on that, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to tailor our thinking to the generality of the population and their housing requirements, which, as Nick has said, are very different in their particulars, but also are very different in terms of how customers of energy companies, for example, respond to the changes that will be upon us, and so on. And I was going to not exactly disagree with Emma, but there are actually in this country a large number of so-called sticky customers of energy companies, who in some instances haven't changed their supplier since energy was privatized. And they've inherited, as it were, from a certain central electricity generating board region, a number of customers who often haven't got smart meters, are living in pretty poorly insulated properties, but haven't ever been reached by people who might change. Octopus, I mean, I've had a very close relationship with Octopus over a long period of time, and I've had regular occasions of going around and looking what Octopus is doing. And I can say positively, Octopus is absolutely one of the most agile and forward-looking energy retailers in this particular area, and the sort of things they are doing pretty much presage the future of energy retailing as a whole. That is increasingly getting the idea of energy as a service into the proposition, whereby you're, as it were, you're wrapping round the customer, not just selling them electricity, but helping them with the things that they're going to have to do with their home to change how that works over a period of time, and perhaps being responsible directly for some of those innovations, or indeed with partners. How, for example, can we broaden the appeal of heat pumps? I mean, it's quite right. Octopus has done a great job in getting customers coming forward for heat pumps, and indeed for smart meters, as a result of the sort of things that Octopus has offered as tariffs and other arrangements. But we've got to accept that there are very large numbers of people who are fairly impervious to those sort of arrangements at the moment, and nevertheless have to be part of the energy uprating revolution, as it were. And we've got to work out methods whereby we can get them on board and penetrate them in a way that a number of people haven't. And great, now that Octopus has 6.5 million customers, probably some of the element of its customers are part of that sticky generation. Although in terms of Octopus's acquisitions, they quite often have acquired other energy companies that also didn't have sticky customers in their propositions. So how can we, between us, that is government and energy companies and all those involved in the area, actually access that part of the market which is just not moving in terms of energy efficiency and uprating? And that's one reason why a retrofit program really has to be area-based, locally based, area by area, street by street, rather than the pick and mix that we've got at the moment. Because among other things, that means that you have trusted people at local level who are able to go to those particular homes and say, well, would you like this? Would you like that? And by the way, the people next door are having this done. How about you? But also can actually focus funding and support into particular areas that they will know will really need this work being done at an early stage, and not to be done by a department in Whitehall, or in the case of the Green Homes Grant, I think a consultancy in Toronto, which had the management of the whole scheme. So how do you, in government, make sure that the program is comprehensive? Great that we've got energy as service leaders in the market, such as Octopus, taking good care of a lot of those people who are more inclined to make the change. How do we bring the rest up to that standard, as it were, as far as the country is concerned? And that does mean some very serious government intervention, both in terms of funding and in terms of organisation, as far as those changes are concerned. And that's something we really want to take very seriously from day one of a new Labour government, that we will start to implement that change in making how it works more effective.
Yeah, so let's hold up on, I mean, Emma, I think you said this earlier on, you are, and you think you are, and you are doing very good things, and you need more people to be doing very good things. And there's an industry requirement for you not to be sort of up there. You want others to join you on the pedestal, I think you said. So I think there's a kind of recognition on that. Alan, just let me push you a second on. So you talked about, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, doing this stuff, covering the ground, because it can be challenging, it can be difficult. It's not straightforward, particularly once you picked off the low-hanging fruit, which, we are to a degree. Who in your mind, when you think about it like that, who are the players that are instrumental in making that happen on a neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street basis? Is it local authorities? Is it social enterprises? Is it community groups? Is it housing associations? Is it the energy companies themselves? Is it all of the above? How do you think about marshalling and organizing that movement at the local scale? Get Nick to think about this as well, and Emma. But Alan, you kick us off. How do you mobilize that movement?
Yeah, very substantially, it's local authorities.
Right.
And the question, I think, from the government point of view, is to the extent to which government trusts local authorities and also funds local authorities properly to do that kind of work. And the second responsibility then that government has, in addition to trusting local authorities to do it, is to make sure that the arrangements for how the different housing tenures can come together in a particular area to work in their different ways to come to the overall area uprating conclusion. So, for example, we had just recently a debate about the uprating of the landlord's requirement to uprate the energy efficiency of their homes to make them lettable for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, not to put too fine a point in it, government bottled it. They haven't brought forward changes in the requirement of landlords to uprate their properties, and they've kept the exceptions and exemptions that there were in place before in place now. So if you've got an area-based scheme and you've got, say, 30% private rented sector, 30% local authority housing or social housing providers, and 30% owner occupiers, which themselves will be in very different situations depending on the building fabric in different parts of the country. You then got to have the offer from government to back up how that is going to work properly in an area in place. So you've got to have the landlord uprating requirements. You've got to have the low interest or no interest loans in place for owner occupiers to do their own work to some considerable extent in uprating properties, along with offers from the government. And then you've got to have the social housing sector, which actually has done a pretty good job overall in bringing its properties up to scratch. Yeah. Available to, in some instances, lead the way in those particular areas for bringing all those other houses up to scratch. So a combination of trusting local authorities to make it work,
yeah,
ensuring that government has actually given those local authorities and other local actors the tools to make the programs work. And then overall the planning of the whole process to make sure that at the end of the day, you really do have large areas of the country all together up energy efficiently in unison, as it were. And those with long memories will remember things like the housing action areas and general improvement areas we had many years ago, which had that same sort of principle as far as housing improvement is concerned. So we really need to look at this as home energy improvement areas and how we make them all work together.
Okay, very good. So let me come to let me come to you, Emma, and I give Nick the last word. So well-resourced local government is what Alan's saying, in a conducive environment where this is not like pushing water uphill, reasonable regulation, etc., etc. Who, when you think about the movement at that sort of local level, how does that play out in your mind's eye?
Oh, this is talking to my heart, right? So not the day job, but got me the day job. I set up the first rural district heat network in the country. You know, I've built homes for my village utilising a community land trust. I've taken the village off oil. I know how challenging that is as a community scale, but definitely something I would totally back. And we've got a 50-50 joint venture with the co-op that supports community energy and unity with grants and loans. So this is really close to my heart. I totally agree. But also on the new build sector, which we've hardly touched on, they need to lead the way aspirationally. People need to know what it's like to live in an EPC A or B home. And with basic technology, we've learnt with our Kraken database that we can remove energy bills. I mean, that's our aspiration, right? Let's move bills away from people. Let's control the tech and eventually get that in retrofit. So, you know, there's a many-fold to different things to happen, but I do believe that communities from a groundswell upwards can really affect change positively. I've done it.
Brilliant. Great. That's a great endorsement. You've done it. You're not only telling us how to do it, you've done it yourself. Nick, final thoughts from you on, you know, creating a sort of momentum, a movement at that local level, and how do we manage that, and how do we think about that?
No, I think this is fantastic, and it's we're getting all very exciting. We're working actually at the Just Transition Finance Lab at the LSE with two councils at the moment, quite different. Cumberland in the northwest, and Westminster in the heart of London, and there's a real appetite from these local authorities to work very smartly with their residents to deploy in the ways we've done. I think it's enabling them through the funding, in terms of, obviously we know local authority funding has been cut quite severely. But also thinking about how we can scale up working mechanisms. So I think, as well as central governments thinking about how program for retrofitting every house, these houses as well, is really connected to the skills agenda in different regions, developing the small businesses, and then seeing how national, this is our focus, finance, national finance institutions can come in alongside. We have the UK Infrastructure Bank. They have a role for supporting local authorities. How can that help? The British Business Bank for SMEs. So I think there's a lot of appetite, which has been slightly depressed, unfortunately. There's a lot of appetite at local level, but it's been, I think, sort of really pushed back a bit in recent years. And I think that we need to unlock that, and I think we can then go to the races.
Excellent.
I also concur what Alan said about housing associations. They've played a huge role as well in rolling out green technology, and they shouldn't be forgotten.
Very good. A very good, enthusiastic point on which to finish, which isn't always the case when we talk about different issues. So a very enthusiastic finish. So thank you to my panelists, to Alan, to Emma, and to Nick. Thanks to LSE for working with us on this event and the previous three. Thank you all for joining. If you want to listen to parts or all of it again, you'll be on our website very shortly. But until the next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks very much. Bye for now.